Saudi Arabia anyway.
French President Emmanuel Macron will host European leaders for an emergency summit on the Ukraine war.
Slava Ukraine.
The hastily arranged meeting comes after U.S. officials suggested Europe would have no role in any talks on ending the conflict.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily. We are here live back in Washington, D.C. Today is February 17th, 2025, Anno Domini. Happy President's Day. Well, as you know, this past week I was out from the show. I want to say a huge thank you to Michelle Backus and Kevin Posobiec, who covered down here on Human Events Daily while I was on the territory of Europe. Traveled along with Secretary Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, Kiev, Ukraine, for a meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky right there in the presidential complex. Also met with the Ukrainian Prime Minister, as well as the Ministry of Finance and the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine. Now, publicly, of course, mainstream media had saw that I was originally invited by Secretary Hegseth to accompany him on the NATO summit. However, due to security logistics, I wasn't able to make it to the summit because I was in Kiev. You got to take a long train in and out, 9 hours in, 9 hours out. But just a sincere and heartfelt thank you to both Secretaries Bessent and Hegseth for the invitations. This was an honor, but more so, it was a responsibility. Human Events Daily was brought in by the Trump administration and the Trump White House in an act of radical transparency into these meetings. Imagine it, in World War II at Tehran or Yalta, bringing in independent media and independent voices, and through the power of social media, X, and this podcast right here, Human Events Daily, the only podcast that was invited to take part in these meetings, to actually be there in the room when this kicked off. That shows the absolute willingness of this White House to show what's going on behind closed doors and to put you, the listener, right in a front row seat to history. And so it was my role to document this, to tell you what was happening in real time, and we're going to show this here. I was recording footage the entire time whenever I was able to do so and when I was allowed to do so because of security concerns. So we're going to show you that footage here for the first time on this program, Human Events Daily, that I haven't shown yet. Footage from the train, footage from inside Kiev, footage from inside Ukraine. And yes, folks, there was a missile strike the day that Secretary Bessent and I arrived in Kiev. This is a real war. There are real people being killed. There are real stakes higher than ever. Nuclear war was on the table until November 5th, and Human Events Daily will be here every single day, every step of the way, bringing you the truth in real time. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
understand what America First truly means.
Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back here. Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. Also want to thank the Charlie Kirk audience here joining us for their third hour on the Salem Radio Network. Folks, just got back from Ukraine. And boy, are my arms tired. Look, this was an incredible trip. We had an incredible opportunity. The invitation from Secretary Bessent to accompany his delegation as one of only two press that were able to actually be there on this train, a secure train, a night train with, by the way, full Secret Service accompaniment, as well as Ukrainian military that were with us, soldiers, and we'll show you footage here in just a minute of all of this. Obviously, it made mainstream headlines. The international media not too happy that old Poso was allowed on the trip. But here's the thing. I wasn't there to represent myself. I was there to represent my audience and also the eyes of anyone on social media who wanted to see what was really going on the ground. President Trump and his White House told us that we would have radical transparency, and that's exactly what they're delivering on. Imagine if we had had social media on the ground in Yalta. Imagine if they had been there for the Big Three conference between Stalin and FDR and Churchill right there in Yalta. By the way, Yalta is also in Ukraine. It's actually in Crimea for those paying attention. So the idea that we have had these massive peace talks on the territory of Ukraine, yeah, that's exactly where World War II's peace conference was ended. And oh, by the way, you can learn a whole lot more about that if you understand that all of Eastern Europe was essentially given to Stalin. Who knows? Maybe that wouldn't have happened at Yalta if you had had people there telling you what was going on in real time. I want to take a quick second to shout out one of my sponsors here on the program, because, folks, if you don't have the ability to have the sponsors that we do, if you don't have the ability to support them, then we can't do trips like this, and we can't do work like this, and we can't show you the behind-the-scenes look on world history in real time. All right, folks, a former Biden administration COVID-19 response coordinator recently gave a chilling speech at the University of Michigan School of Public Health. Now, he warned of a new age of pandemics fueled by bioweapons development and natural threats. He called for massive investments in vaccines against pathogens that don't even exist yet and urged a war against so-called misinformation. But the question we need to ask is this: who's working on bioweapons and how many labs are there globally? And we know that evil will always be lurking in the background, and being prepared is the best defense. The wellness company's Contagion Emergency Kit, engineered by Dr. Peter McCullough and his radical board, includes 5 critical life-saving medications like ivermectin, Tamiflu, a nebulizer, and hydroxychloroquine. Every household can now have access to these hard-to-get medications minus the red tape. It's simple. Fill out a digital intake form and your kit arrives in 1 to 2 weeks. Don't wait until the deep state puts their plans into action. Stay ready for the unexpected. Head to twc.health/POSO and use promo code POSO to save $32 off plus free shipping on kits that are only available to U.S. residents. Now, folks, as we know, there is breaking news, and there's been a bunch of breaking news since even this trip took place. So I want to put you in the mindset of this. Now, at this point, J.D. Vance hasn't given his speech in Munich yet. We've yet to hear that President Trump is conducting these one-on-one phone calls with Vladimir Putin. I'll explain what happens to that in a minute here. And, of course, we know tomorrow, Secretary Rubio, along with Steve Witkoff, who's been direct envoy with Russia, as well as Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, are going to be in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for a meeting directly with Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of Russia. What does this mean? Direct talks. Now, Zelensky is also flying to Saudi Arabia, yet we're told that Zelensky didn't have an invitation to the summit. Now, the Ukrainian side is saying, oh, well, this was a mere coincidence that he's going to be there on the same day. We'll see how that plays out. But I want to take you back to the night train to Odessa. And I want to show you what it was like that night. And actually, I believe the first clip we have is the morning as we arrived in Kiev. Now, at this point, just like to say, that as I was recording this, I'd yet to know that there would be airstrikes taking place in Kiev that very day. So let's play that first. SOT-1, the night train to Kiev. We were here, Human Events Daily, just about 3 months into the outbreak of the Ukraine-Russia war. And now we're here again, 3 years later. You're here at the start. Hopefully, here for what should be the end. See the frost on the ground. Some snow, not too much. Smoke coming up from the chimneys as we pass by the villages and settlements outside of Kiev. And later today, Secretary Bessent will be meeting with President Zelensky, presenting that new deal to him from President Trump in person, by the way. Not going to Munich, not going to Vienna or Brussels, one of those places. No, we've come all the way here to Kiev, to the center of things, to the heart of the matter, to directly get down to business. So that's where we're going to go today. The house is now starting to get a bit larger, get closer and closer into Kiev proper. So as you can see, those were settlements going from outside the outskirts of Kiev, getting in there. A little bit warmer than I had expected. They said that it was a bit of a winter thaw, because normally you'd think in February that those lands would be covered with ice and snow. Didn't really see much of that, and in fact was able to walk around outside without a huge, thick winter jacket. So, of course, we'll have to thank the Lord for that while we were there. I've got another shot that I want to play for you, myself actually on the street after that initial meeting with the Ukrainian Prime Minister. Here in Kiev, just had Secretary Bessent meet with the Prime Minister of Ukraine, discussed the economic deal that he's looking to put forward for Ukraine and the United States. He said he wants to intertwine the economies, continue material support for Ukraine from the United States side, as a signal both to the Ukrainian leadership and the Russian leadership that America does intend to support a fully and independent Ukraine. Sort of an interesting anecdote, but that actual street that I'm walking on right there, I remember taking a few photos of it, and that's the very same street that Tanya Tay and myself walked on a visit to Kiev about 8 years ago. And now that was the summertime, that was not wintertime, but we were traveling. We had a bit of a long layover, and we were actually able to walk down that very same street. I showed her the photo and I asked her if she remembered it, and she said exactly what I remember. So we were there with Secretary Bessent. You can see some of the security detail behind me in the photo, but you can also see life going on as routine in Kiev. You can see the pattern of life. You can see the fact that people are dug in, that people want to see a potential end to this war, but they want to see it done so in the right way. They don't, in Ukraine, the Ukrainians don't want to capitulate. They want to see an end to the war that will put them in the best standpoint. Now, what Secretary Bessent went over with was a copy of this draft mineral deal. And the mineral deal was something that, of course, that we saw Zelensky talk about, we saw President Trump talk about it. It's about these rare earth elements that exist on the territory of Ukraine. Would the United States be able to recoup these loans, these guarantees to Ukraine, these billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine by getting this deal signed over on? Well, that's exactly what Secretary Bessent went over there to find out. We'll tell you a little bit more about what happened after the break. I want you to take a second, pick up your phone, so go to subscribe, Human Events Daily on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you don't miss a minute, because Human Events Daily is where we bring you to the front row seat of world history.
Terrence Bates here with your Real America's Voice news break. Thanks so much for being along for the ride. Peace talks related to the war between Russia and Ukraine are ramping up as top U.S. and Russian officials are set to meet in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. That meeting is also set up a sit-down between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead the U.S. delegation, which will include U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Tomorrow's negotiation follows up on President Trump's phone conversations with both Presidents Putin and Zelensky. You may remember Vice President J.D. Vance also met with the Ukrainian president on Friday in Munich, Germany. And while government offices are closed today in observance of President's Day, Elon Musk's Doge team will be hard at work rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse. The team is expected to visit the Federal Aviation Administration's Air Traffic Control Command Center in suburban Washington, D.C. today. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says Doge personnel will get a first-hand look at the current system. They'll learn what air traffic controllers like and dislike about their current tools and envision how we can make a new, better, modern, and safer system. Today's Doge review comes on the heels of several hundred FAA probationary employees being fired as part of President Trump and Elon Musk's campaign to cut the size of the federal government. The Trump Department of Justice is calling on the U.S. Supreme Court to decide whether the commander-in-chief can fire the head of the U.S. Office of Special Counsel. The independent agency protects federal employees who are whistleblowers. Hampton Dillinger sued the Trump administration after being fired by email last month. He argues that his firing was illegal based on a law that protects leaders of independent agencies from being fired by the president, except for in cases of neglect of duty, malfeasance, or inefficiency. As a result, a federal judge issued a temporary order last week allowing Dellinger to keep his job while the case is being adjudicated. That's a quick check of your headlines. I'm Terrence Bates.
Today, they talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec, where's Jack? Jack, who's done a great job.
All right, folks, we're back. Human Events Daily here, Washington, D.C. Jack Posobiec back from Ukraine on this peace delegation with Secretary Bessent. Now listen up, because I'm about to put out something to you that'll change the way you start your day. And let me tell you something, folks, real quick. If you were going to be going on a delegation overseas, cutting through time zones, then going to a security conference in Munich, you're cutting through jet lag, you're not sleeping well because you're on a Soviet-era railroad for 20 hours, let me tell you something. You need to fight through that with Blackout Coffee. Blackout Coffee isn't just coffee, it's a wake-up call. A call to rise and grind, to push harder, and never compromise on what you stand for. This isn't your average cup of joe. Every bag of Blackout Coffee is roasted with purpose, packed with bold flavor, and fueled by the kind of values that built the United States. Grit, determination, and a refusal to back down. They don't just make coffee, they make a statement. Blackout Coffee is stepping up and adding more warriors to get your orders out faster than ever. So when you hit the order now button, you know your coffee's coming fresh and ready to fuel your next move. Whether you're powering through the daily grind, chasing big goals, or just refusing to settle for mediocrity, Blackout Coffee's got your back. Don't just drink coffee, drink Blackout. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/POSO and use promo code POSO for 20% off your first order. Taste the coffee that doesn't just wake you up, it fires you up. That's blackoutcoffee.com/POSO. Let's go. Let's go get some. So, folks, obviously, we're there in Ukraine. At this point, we're going through our various meetings. We're in the security area. We get to the Ukrainian presidential palace, and I believe we do have some footage. I know it's not one of the clips, guys, but I think we have some footage of me walking around outside there, and then some shots of just in the room with the prime minister. Because what I want to explain is that we couldn't actually film inside for security purposes. Now, of course, people have seen the published images and videos of Secretary of Treasury Bessent as well as Vladimir Zelensky. But when you go into those offices, look, he's got secure information in there, sensitive information. Remember, they're running a war. They're running a war from inside these offices. So guess what that means? No cell phones. So for about 3 hours, your humble host, Poso here, was without his cell phone, without access to social media. What can I do? That is the deal. You want in? That's how you get in. So we were there with President Zelensky, with Secretary of the Treasury Bessent. I'm standing pretty much right next to the camera when this conversation took place. What you're looking at now on the screen was Secretary Bessent and Zelensky immediately after the meeting, when Zelensky said that he would not be signing the mineral deal with Bessent that day, but instead would review and get back to it with J.D. Vance in Munich the next day. So we've got a clip from the train on the way back to Poland here that I want to play for you now. What Zelensky didn't know was that during that same time frame, President Trump was holding another conversation, a conversation directly with President Vladimir Putin. Trump said in a post that went up almost coordinated to the very minute when we walked out of Zelensky's presidential offices. He essentially was saying that the United States and Russia are going to look to work together on all partnerships, all cooperation, working together not just to end the Ukraine war, but also looking to potentially open the door towards renormalization of ties economically and otherwise between Russia and the West. So rather than stay on the escalatory spiral of NATO and Russia going back and forth, try to find a way off of that. And President Trump said that he and Putin had a long conversation. Putin emphasized the need for common sense, a refrain of President Trump's from during the campaign. And also, very significantly, President Trump said that he agreed to host Putin in the United States, as well as he himself, President Trump, travel to Russia. This is something that a few years ago would have been unthinkable. So what you're seeing there, I've gotten back on the train, night train back to Poland, out of Kyiv. Some of my initial thoughts at hearing that the United States of America, through President Trump, duly elected president, is now holding one-on-one direct talk with Vladimir Putin to end the Ukraine war. President Trump following through on his promise there to do so as quickly as possible. We'll be right back. Human Events Daily.
to this Real America's Voice news break. I'm Terrence Bates. Peace talks related to the war between Russia and Ukraine are ramping up as top U.S. and Russian officials are set to meet in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. That meeting is also to set up a sit down, between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead the U.S. delegation, which will include U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff as well as National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Tomorrow's negotiation follows President Trump's phone conversations with both Presidents Putin and Zelensky. You may remember Vice President J.D. Vance also met with the Ukrainian president on Friday in Munich, Germany. Happening today, Washington, D.C.-based U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan is calling a hearing in a case that's brought by 13 Democratic state attorneys general. It's related to a temporary restraining order that would keep Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency team from accessing information from various government agencies. Judge Chutkan heard oral arguments in the case on Friday, and there's still no word why she's calling for today's hearing, especially on President's Day, which is a federal holiday. At issue is whether Doge will have access to information systems at the Departments of Labor, Education, Health and Human Services, Energy, Transportation, Commerce, and the Office of Personnel Management. Meantime, Elon Musk and his team aren't taking this President's Day off. The team is expected to visit the Federal Aviation Administration's Air Traffic Control Command Center in suburban Washington, D.C. today. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says Doge personnel will get a first-hand look at the current system. They'll learn what air traffic controllers like and dislike about their current tools and envision how we can make a new, better, modern, and safer system. Today's Doge review comes on the heels of several hundred FAA probationary employees being fired as part of the President Trump and Elon Musk campaign to cut the size of the federal government. That's a quick check of your headlines. I'm Terrence Bates.
And Jack, where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, Jack Posobiec back here live, Human Events Daily. By the way, so here's what's amazing, folks, and I want to also say thank you to the Charlie Kirk Third Hour audience joining us here on Salem News. So the deal that I've been talking about here for the past week now is currently the lead on Drudge Report. I'm going to ask the team to get that up real quick here for us. But right now, I want to tell you very quickly about one of our sponsors. By the way, again, help us out with our sponsors because they allow us to do this kind of work, to go on these trips, to be able to do this kind of reporting. And again, put you in the front row seat of world history. Now look, we've been talking about it for months. Part of the Trump mandate was to get RFK Jr. confirmed and make America healthy again. And between the election, the inauguration, and all the work Human Events has been focused on, it's easy to put your health on the back burner. So, Tanya Tay and I started taking new supplements from We Heart Nutrition to make sure that we're getting everything that we need to stay healthy. We Heart Nutrition creates the highest quality, research-backed supplements for men and women in every age and in every life stage. What makes them amazing is their mission. They're pro-family, pro-baby, and pro-life. Guess what? 10% of every sale gets donated to pregnancy care centers. So when you shop with them, you're not just investing in your health, you're actually also supporting moms and babies in need. These supplements are made with the most bioavailable ingredients, meaning your body will actually absorb them. No fillers, no junk. With over 1,000 five-star reviews, people are seeing real results and sharing how these supplements have changed their lives. Go to weheartnutrition.com and take their 20-second quiz to get personalized recommendations just for you. Right now, We Heart Nutrition is offering 20% off your first order when you use promo code POSO at checkout. Plus, get a free bamboo capsule box with any order of $50 or more. That's weheartnutrition.com, promo code POSO weheartnutrition.com, promo code POSO for 20% off. Folks, so we're going to get that Drudge Report post up in a second here. I want to talk about the way that they're covering this deal. I want to play the final clip that we have here from the night train to Kiev. Human Events Daily.
The American people don't want any more war. The American people don't want to see other countries put ahead of them. The American people don't want to see these massive outflows of money from the United States to these endless wars. And so if there's some economic viability project, this is of course what President Trump's plan was, talking about the minerals, other resources, a deal that could be done between the U.S. and Ukraine, that's something that perhaps the American people can get behind. But this idea of continuing to fund an endless war, simply not in the cards. And so Zelensky going and acting like this thing can go on indefinitely, I think it gravely underestimates the mood of where the American people currently are. And I think it gravely underestimates his own leverage as he sits there in Kiev. Now, President Trump has said he wants to end the war. And this is something that President Trump has always said, that the Russian state isn't some Middle Eastern country. This isn't Iraq, this isn't Afghanistan, this isn't Libya, this isn't North Korea, this isn't some country that can just be pushed around because they're so small. They are, in fact, a leading nuclear power and the leading nuclear power in the world. A country where it makes sense, and President Trump has said this again and again, it makes sense for the United States and Russia to get along.
So here we go. That was Secretary Bessent and what they were telling us on that side of the trip. Now, I want to tell you, and of course, as we learned about that, that's also when we found out that President Zelensky, would not be signing President Trump's deal. And of course, raced to the phone there minutes after President Trump's truth post to get a call in to the White House. Let's look at the Drudge Report right now in real time. And what do we see? USA plan to stranglehold Ukraine. Stranglehold. And let's see. This is up from the Telegraph. Now, this is the UK's version of events. So this is the globalist version. And by the way, folks, this shows you the importance of having something like Human Events Daily, independent media there on the ground, actually able to show you what went down in this deal. You heard my version of it. Now let's hear the globalist spin. Panic in Kiev as U.S. president demands higher share of GDP than Germany's First World War reparations. Well, hold on a second. Germany's First World War reparations, this was a situation where the United States was funding the war effort in Ukraine. Almost $200 billion have gone to Ukraine. So what President Trump and Secretary Bessent are looking at is a way to get a return on the investment, on a way to recoup the losses. This isn't about reparations. Why would Ukraine and Zelensky be paying reparations to the United States? It makes no sense. The globalist narrative from Drudge Report has no sense on its face. It's completely backwards. This is about recouping losses, which, by the way, if you want to get really interesting, why didn't the U.S. get any money back for the Lend-Lease program for the billions and billions of dollars that FDR gave to who? The Soviet Union, even before Pearl Harbor ever started. But of course, we're not allowed to ask those kind of questions. Again, what was really going on in those negotiations at the end of World War II? I'm not sure, but I do know that if there's negotiations going on vis-a-vis World War III, that Human Events is going to be there and I'm going to be in the room. So what do we see here with the Telegraph? The Telegraph said, and this is how you know the globalists hate this plan. All right, the globalists hate this thing. They want it out of there. This is terrible. They don't want it at all. Donald Trump's plan for a $500 billion US dollar payback from Ukraine goes far beyond U.S. control over the country's critical minerals. It covers everything from ports and infrastructure to oil and gas and the larger resource base of the country. The terms of the contract that landed at Zelensky's office a week ago amount to the U.S. economic colonization of Ukraine in legal perpetuity. It implies a burden of reparations that cannot be possibly achieved. The document has caused consternation and panic in Kiev. The Telegraph has obtained a draft of the decisional contract. Let's see. Now, listen to this line, though. It states that the U.S. and Ukraine should form a joint investment fund to ensure that hostile parties to the conflict do not benefit from the reconstruction of Ukraine. Now, what does that mean? That means Hostile parties, what's that about? That's about keeping China out. That's about setting it up so that China isn't involved. And by the way, I'm not even going to sit here right now and say whether or not I'm for this deal or against this deal, because that's not what I'm trying to do right now. I'm trying very hard to just accurately depict what the deal was and what the deal is not. Honestly, I'm not even sure if this is in the United States' interest. Certainly, getting rare earth minerals, getting this stuff from Ukraine is in the U.S. interest. Is it really worth it? I'm not sure. But obviously, I would like to see something for the American people. The idea, though, is we don't want World War III happening. That is the price. That is the cost that we're getting here. The value is that we don't have nuclear annihilation. But hostile parties to the conflict do not benefit from the reconstruction of Ukraine. That is all about keeping China out. So no China, don't want China at all, don't want any of this getting in, because we know China wants to get in there with the backfill. And by the way, if Ukraine brings China in, if Zelensky brings China in, then what a slap in the face that would be to the United States after the United States paid, again, $200 billion humanitarian aid, the war effort, and even financing for the Ukrainian government. And as a matter of fact, the Ukrainian pension system, even the Ukrainian pension system was on this at one point. That's what we need to get into, folks. That's what we need to explain. That's what we need to get into for everyone. And so for them saying it's reparations, no, it's not reparation. It's not reparation. Okay. There's no reparations at all. When we're looking at this piece, joint venture, U.S., Ukraine, if there's going to be a further agreement, if there's going to be a further relationship, if there's going to be look, if you want this relationship to continue between the U.S. and Ukraine, there's got to be some benefit to the American people. And that's what President Trump is coming in and saying. That's what President Trump is saying for this. Because if there isn't a direct benefit for the American people, then why would the U.S. be directly involved? It's not our business. It just isn't. It's a feud that's been going on for, in some cases, hundreds of years. In some cases, certainly for the last 30 years. Ukrainians, the Russians, this is all going back to the fall of the Soviet Union. Where did the borders lie? Where does it all go? In fact, my family, the Pasovic family, is from a very small village that's very close to where the current border between Ukraine and Poland is. That's the current border. Didn't used to be the border. Didn't used to be a border town, but it is now. It's actually not far from. In fact, because of the security concerns for the trip over, I wasn't even able to inform my Polish cousins that I was going to be in town, even though at one point I was about 35 minutes away from the village. It is what it is, folks. What can I say? Sorry, guys. I'll let you know next time. But when it really comes down to it, this is about an understanding of cutting through all of the BS. The leaders of Europe, guess what? You didn't pay for this thing. You didn't put up for this thing. And that's why President Trump is cutting you out. You're not in the room. What are you going to do about it? Trudeau's Canada, obviously. But the point is, these guys who want to bark about this, who want to complain about this, Olaf Scholz, Donald Tusk, over in the liberal globalist Polish minister. No. This is about peace, and this is about the United States getting a peace for themselves. That's a little play on words. You get peace, and we get a peace. That's what we're doing here. And so President Trump understands, by the way, the development of these resources would come in from U.S. firms, and the Ukrainian people would also benefit, which I don't see anything on the Telegraph piece about that at all. I don't see anything in the Telegraph piece pointing out that actually the government of Ukraine would also get 50% of the return on investment here. So it isn't just that the U.S. would get it. It would be that the U.S. would be sharing it with Ukraine. That's not reparations. That's not how that works. This all goes back to the idea of President Trump as a businessman looking at the United States as a business and thinking about, look, you guys get peace, but we want a peace too. We'll be right back. More Human Events Daily. Jack Pope. All right, Jack Posobiec, we are here. Human Events Daily. Got a great shot of National Harbor. They're going to be, by the way, at National Harbor starting Wednesday. I got a crazy week, so I'm going to be at Mar-a-Lago tomorrow for General Flynn's event. Then I'm going straight to CPAC at the Gaylord National Harbor in Washington, D.C. So I'll be there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, probably Saturday and Sunday as well. President Trump is going to be there, I believe. Then we've also got Steve Bannon, the Force Multiplier Academy on Wednesday, doing the show from there. Hope to see you there very soon as well, because it's going to be an incredible day. Went a little bit viral last year. There was a comment about ending democracy. Little comment that I made that Bill Maher and Joy Reid certainly didn't like. So we made a little news last time. I don't know. What do you think? Should we go for it again? I think we can go even bigger this time around. What do you say? We'll find out on Wednesday.
When I'm working long hours, I'm always listening to Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Segment Human Events Daily, really just World Events Daily. It feels like here on the program. I want to thank again the Charlie Kirk audience for being here, their third hour, simulcasted on the Salem News Network. Thanks so much. And look, folks, when it comes down to it, we have to understand that our world is a constant state of flux, and we are living on a knife's edge. Nuclear war was on the ballot on November 5th. That's no joke. Missiles are still raining down on Kiev. In fact, including the day that I was there with Secretary Bessent. Real people are dying. Real people are caught up in this mess. This is a real war. And your tax dollars are funding it. Your tax dollars are paying for it, including the politicians that are involved, including whatever side deals are involved. We know that there are issues, which I told you about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, about the black market for arms that was coming out of Ukraine when we went there the first time with my brother, with Kevin Posobiec. And it was just the two of us on the train. And no, we did not have a security delegation that time. We didn't have Secret Service with the long rifles. We didn't have these other guys coming around, the military with the rocket propelled grenades. We didn't have any of this stuff. We had the two of us, a wad of cash, and a couple of microphones and cameras. So look, that's what we do. That's what we do here on Human Events Daily. And again, absolute honor, absolute responsibility. So this is what we're here doing on Human Events Daily every day, and what we will continue to do, because we know what's coming next, folks. Next, in Saudi Arabia, there's going to be the sit down between the foreign ministers. And then coming up after that, President Trump will meet with Vladimir Putin. And Putin, he has said also, by the way, will come to America. So if President Trump is going to Moscow, well, who knows? Maybe Human Events Daily have to go to Moscow too. If Putin is coming to Washington, D.C., they will be here to tell you the truth about what goes on. Because I remember, I'll never forget, being at the Putin-Trump summit in Helsinki in 2018. I remember being there, and we'd brought, Tanya and I had even brought Jack, and they were out walking around the harbor while I was inside the presidential palace. They had the meeting, it was perfunctory. There was some argument, some disagreement about Nord Stream 2, and then Jim Acosta goes up on CNN and starts screaming about treason, starts screaming about President Trump has sold out the United States for having a conversation with the largest nuclear power in the world. And so the question is, when these negotiations are going on, what role does the mainstream media play? What role does the corporate media play? We know from past experience that the role they play is bad actors. The role they play are the people who are trying to gum up the works of peace. Why? Because there's no money in peace. It's war. War is the racket. And so the warmongers and those that benefit from it and their corporate sponsors and their corporate money pushers, this is the narrative that they want to spread. The narrative that you must be at war, that we must be at war, even nuclear war. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. We'll win. Remember, you even saw this at some points where they were floating these insane ideas like we could survive a limited nuclear strike. Are you kidding me? With the hypersonic glide vehicles that they now have, the ability to cut through radar, cut through early warning systems. This isn't the Cold War anymore, and with the dew line up in Canada and Greenland, by the way, of course, we're not going to be free. By the way, Secretary Hegseth, there's another base that needs to get renamed. It's up there in Greenland. It's called Fool Air Base. That needs to be there. Look, ladies and gentlemen, MAGA world peace will prevail. The promises that were made will be kept. And the warmongers can take a hike. Because this is the peace administration. This is the era of peace. But be warned. Be warned. If anyone gets in our way, then they will understand the full might and full fury of the true American military under Secretary Hegseth that is transforming this soft, bloated organization into a true war-fighting, capable, and lethal organization once more. That's part of making America great again. Because if you have a strong military, you will have a strong country. And if you have a prosperous country, that is the strongest country of all. Sincerely honored to be part of this trip, to be a part of history. Thank you to everyone for being here, for helping this. Again, to the Charlie Kirk audience for tuning in, Hour 3. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.
You asked, and we heard you, America.
Real America's Voice is coming to iHeartMedia.
Yes, Real America's Voice is now breaking through the white noise of the mainstream media.
Just download the iHeart app, and you'll have all of us right at your fingertips.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. Our Real America's Voice team is going places others won't.
We need to take cover of what was incoming into Israeli territory.
To show you what they don't want you to see.
It's still a disaster. What's the latest?
They call these street releases. You've got hundreds of people being dropped off. It's getting worse.
We're the nation's fastest growing news program for a reason.
Real journalism. They're all marching down to the White House.
Sounds to me, Ben, like they won't be happy until Israel doesn't exist.
Real American news.
America is under chemical warfare attack. Fentanyl is the weapon.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
I appreciate you guys very, very much.
This is America's Voice Live with Steve Gruber.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber. It is Monday, the 17th of February, President's Day. Let's get to the day's top stories. As always, thank you for being here and starting the week with us. World leaders have gathered for an emergency summit to discuss the Ukraine-Russia war and have expressed their worries. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West will join us to discuss. They also have a concern with Donald Trump, apparently. Plus, President Trump trying to protect Christians in America by ensuring religious liberty. We're talking about what led to the move and why it's important now and then later. Ben Bergquam has some exclusive video you have to see to actually believe. All that and more coming up on America's Voice Live on a Monday. Yeah, you don't want to miss Ben running up the hill there. We'll have more. Now, it's been a month now since Donald Trump was sworn into office as the nation's 47th president. He's making good on his promises to make America great again, and he's doing it at breakneck speed. In fact, CNN's Caitlin Collins says it's been a whirlwind reporting on a president who actually does what he says and actually makes public appearances again. Listen to this.
So you're doing this every day. You're in D.C.
Yes.
The pace of the Trump administration seems to be moving pretty quickly. How are you holding up?
It is insane. And I think everyone is kind of like readjusting and re-remembering what it was like 4 years ago, 4 years ago. I remember when Biden first took office in January, the New York Times wrote the story about how quiet the weekends were because for reporters, every weekend had just been like it was like a 7-day work week. And now we're back to that basically where it's just essentially nonstop every day. You kind of wake up like not knowing what you're going to be doing, what the schedule is. I was walking to get breakfast one day this week. I was like, okay, I'm going to have a nice little breakfast before I go to work. And halfway there, they're like, Trump's doing a press conference in an hour. And I physically ran back home so I could change and get ready.
Oh, gosh. It appears that despite complaints by CNN, Trump's going full speed ahead again today, despite Caitlin's concerns. In fact, just 48 hours ago, the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, made a significant move, cutting another $370 million in taxpayer dollars that were allocated to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at the Department of Education. Doge, which is currently led by Elon Musk to streamline unnecessary government spending, took to X to announce that it had canceled at least 70 DEI training grants, and these grants amounted to $373 million. Elon emphasized that their goal is full transparency with the public. Watch this.
Well, all of our actions are fully public. So if you see anything, you say like, wait a second, hey, Elon, that seems like maybe that's, there's a conflict there. It's not like people are going to be shy about saying that. They'll say it immediately.
Including you yourself.
Yes. But transparency is what builds trust, not simply somebody asserting trust. So not somebody saying they're trustworthy, but transparency, so you can see everything that's going on.
All right, joining me now to discuss this is the representative for Colorado's 5th Congressional District in the 119th Congress, Congressman Jeff Crank. Congressman, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I got to ask you this, sir. Why are Democrats so hopping mad that Doge is cutting costs everywhere you look and helping American taxpayers? It seems that they don't like this idea at all, and it's foreign to me, honestly, sir. I mean, cutting costs, getting rid of wasteful spending, helping out the working man and woman of this country, shouldn't that be front and center for those folks? Doesn't seem to be.
Well, you know what, Steve, when you're having somebody fight you on cutting waste, fraud, and abuse in government, you're winning, right? And I think we are winning with the American people. They understand this stuff. They voted in November to be done with this kind of DEI nonsense and a lot of this waste. We are $35 trillion in debt. And that's what I keep telling folks when they complain about Doge or they complain and they throw up some protestation about it. I say, well, then what's your solution? We're $35 trillion in debt. We can't keep going.
And, you think about the $370 million in these grants for DEI for stupid things like, having teachers sit around and talk about how they feel racist. I mean, that's one of the grants that this thing was funding. And you look at that and I think to myself, how many American taxpayers does it take to pay $370 million in taxes? That is a lot of money. And we need more politicians and more elected officials who are going to look at it that way and be defenders of our taxpayers rather than just looking at them as a piggy bank. It's just insanity.
I agree with you on that. Let me ask you this, because it's clear that you mentioned DEI programs and universities and so forth. So they're changing the names of their DEI programs, changing the titles of certain staffers and so forth, but trying to play the same game, you see. And so that's happening. I'm also seeing that in Cairo, for example, USAID offices there that look like a bunker, look like a military complex, not some sort of a place to help people get water and bread. These things are still operating, despite Donald Trump coming out and saying, okay, we're going to defund this, Doge saying we're going to cut money here. These places somehow continue to get money in defiance of Donald Trump, in defiance of federal law. How is that possible?
Well, I mean, we saw it in 2016 through 2020. We saw how they fight back. You've got this bureaucracy that decides they think they're in charge. I was thinking about this just the other day, with the president trying to fire some people in the federal workforce and saying, these jobs aren't needed anymore, or even the offer to do the buyouts. And we've got court challenges. We've got people saying, oh, you can't do this. We are in a world of hurt in America. If the president of the United States, who runs the executive branch, can't fire employees of the federal government that we are paying and that the taxpayers are paying, if he can't fire them, who in the world can? I mean, we got real problems.
Well, USAID felt that they didn't answer to anyone. It's a great example you made right there. Can't be fired, can't be downgraded, can't be moved, can't be told what to do, can't be told to come to the office to do their job, can't be told anything, but can demand a payment from you, sir, and me and the American taxpayer. How outrageous is that?
Beyond outrageous. And really, if you think about it, it's the survival of our country, right, at stake. Because if they get to decide that, again, $35 trillion in debt, if we can't, as the elected leaders, as members of Congress, as the president of the United States, if we can't change that, and we can't say that these people are fired or they're let go or their jobs no longer needed, we aren't in charge. So we have to decide right now, the American people have to decide, are we in charge and are they in charge? The American people, through their elected representatives, are they in charge or are these unelected bureaucrats in charge?
Well, I just saw some headlines clear that a judge has now taken the side of Doge, the side of cutting taxpayer dollars to these ridiculous operations. Let me ask you, sir. You're new to Congress, right? You're there. Yes. You replaced another member that moved to a different district, right? Colorado's an energy state, so I just want to ask you about Colorado and the priorities for Colorado. You're an energy state. Donald Trump wants energy to be front and center. It's a key thing. Fentanyl, obviously a problem for cities across Colorado. You had Tren de Aragua taking over apartment complexes in Denver. You've got the border in general. What are the most important things when you talk to your constituents? I know you haven't been in Congress long, but what are the things that came to the top during your election and now since you've been in office?
First and foremost, the border and getting control of this porous border, which the president's made great progress on already. I mean, our border crossings are way down, daily border crossings. It's not enough. We need to keep it up, and we need to have Congress step in. He's done what he can do through executive order, but Congress needs to step in and give the funding resources that are necessary to our border patrol agents and others, so that we can control this border. And by that, we also mean to control and stop the flow of fentanyl. Congress just passed a bill that made fentanyl a Schedule I drug. It's been kicked down the can for a long period of time. The House just voted last week to pass that bill. It's going to go over to the Senate now, and hopefully the president will sign it. We're taking great strides on the border and fixing the border. On oil and gas, I mean, that is a gigantic issue, and I think it's one of the great things that the president has really set out to do is to fix our energy delivery system, right? We ought to have an all-of-the-above energy strategy. I'm against any kind of subsidies. Frankly, I'm against oil and gas subsidies. I think all of these kinds of technologies and different types of energy ought to be able to stand on their own merit. And, I think that I'm all for wind energy if wind energy can be productive and it can be competitive with other types of energy. But I'm tired of making billionaires rich because they own wind farms or because they own solar panels or because they own a fleet of electric vehicle companies. We got to get rid of all that stuff. Let the American people choose what kind of energy they want. And I think the president and the administration has done a great job of unleashing and getting ready to unleash American energy. We ought to open up some of our public lands for more research, opening up ANWR up in Alaska and several other places there, offshore oil and gas drilling. I mean, all of these things will help lower the cost of energy and help get us ready for a future where energy is going to continue to be in high demand as we go into AI and some of these other technologies. We're going to need to consume more energy, and America needs to be energy dominant.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and we've got about a minute left here or two. And I want to ask you this, Congressman. Donald Trump's overall approval numbers in the mid to high 50s right now and holding steady. But on certain topics, he's doing really well. The border, 70% approve. On the transgender, taking men out of women's words, 79% approve. When it comes to ending the war and negotiating with Russia and trying to bring an end to the Ukraine war, very high approval ratings. I mean, across the board. And yet, your colleagues on the other side of the aisle would have you believe that this is some sort of a coup, that somehow cutting expenses and taking control of the border and looking out for the average working folks in this country and trying to end wars, it's all a coup. It's some sort of a dictatorship. They are so completely tone deaf, politically speaking. I don't know if that party ever recovers. Because I think they've just gone so far to the extreme that nobody recognizes them anymore. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. I think they had a chance, right? In November, they could have read that election and changed course and decided, look, we're going to be for border security. We're going to be getting rid of these crazy policies that allow men to compete in women's sports. We're not, we're going to actually protect our young daughters and young women to be able to participate in sports. But they didn't do that. Many of them didn't. On the Laken Riley Act, we had 150 Democrats, I think, that voted against the Laken Riley Act, right? I mean, to stop killers from being, for around our country and getting them deported out of this country. So many of them have not taken notice of the election and not read that message. It's unfortunate for them, but it's good for America because America is going to keep standing for the right things and are going to stand behind President Trump.
Yeah, common sense is going to win. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be plenty of lawsuits. We've seen that already. But again, Donald Trump and his team were prepared for it this time, and they're pushing back in court on this lawfare and nonsense, but I hope that the Democrats come back to their senses and get involved with America again. Congressman, nice to see you. Really appreciate you being here. You come back anytime.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. There you have it. Congressman Jeff Crank, brand new to Colorado 5. He replaced Lauren Boebert there. Big win for the Republicans. All right, coming up after the break. The Trump administration is pushing to end the war in Ukraine by meeting with Russian officials in Saudi Arabia this week. Now the UK and Ukraine, well, they feel left out. Their feelings are hurt. Details coming up on ABL. European leaders holding an emergency summit today to discuss the ongoing crisis in Ukraine and growing security risks facing the continent. Tensions have escalated as U.S. President Donald Trump's efforts to work with Russia to end the war have left Ukraine and Europe feeling, well, isolated, left out. The summit comes just ahead of crucial talks between the U.S. and Russian officials set to begin on Tuesday in Saudi Arabia. Ukrainian officials expressed concern, outrage really, after learning they were not informed about the talks, despite President Trump's assurances that Ukraine would be included in the peace negotiations. Now, joining me now to discuss all of this is a former congressman himself, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Colonel, always good to see you on Mondays.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Steve.
So Zelensky's like saying, we will not accept anything that the United States and Russia come up with. And my question to him would be, well, how would you know? Why don't you let Donald Trump work on Russia for a minute here, see what kind of concessions he can get, see what he can build before you start saying, well, we're not going to accept anything. Shouldn't they wait and see a little bit anyhow?
No, you're absolutely right. But I think that Vladimir Zelensky is kind of used to pushing around an American president. After all, during the Biden-Harris administration, we sent an American C-17 over to pick him up in Ukraine and fly him back over to do political events in the state of Pennsylvania. He is not on the high ground, and Donald Trump is. And I think Donald Trump is more of a respected leader and negotiator when it comes to these type of issues. Look, let's be very honest. Russia did not make any moves on Ukraine during the Trump administration. They did so during the Obama-Biden years and the Biden-Harris years. So I think that Vladimir Putin is quite concerned that you have Donald Trump back in the White House, and I know that that's a person that he can respect. And our negotiators will go there to Saudi Arabia, and they will be ready for any of the tricks of the Russians, but they will play their strong hand.
Yeah, you know, it's a lot of reporting out there, Colonel, that 3 or 4 months into this war, there was a peace deal put on the table by Russia that was rejected by Ukraine and the United States collectively. It's been reported widely. And so if Ukraine ends up with a situation that they're unhappy with, I would say they have nobody to blame but themselves. I mean, look, the Donbass and some of those eastern regions of Ukraine have always identified as Russia, as has Crimea. I'm not saying it's right what Russia did here. I'm not siding with Vladimir Putin by any stretch. But when the people of those areas identify as Russian and want to retain Russian identity, I think it has always been a foregone conclusion that part of that very eastern edge of Ukraine would not be Ukrainian anymore. And yet they lost more of it than they needed to because they refused to make a deal early on in this war. I think they made a tactical mistake if that's the way it turns out.
Yeah, it could be a tactical mistake that ended up being a strategic mistake. But I think that Donald Trump can go in there and, again, operating from the high ground, say, hey, look, we understand that these areas where you identify with ethnic Russians, being the eastern Donbass region and also the Crimea region that you said, you would like to retain those. But here are the parameters by which you can have that. And I think we have to be very strict about Russian naval operations there out of the Crimea and the Black Sea. I think we also need to be able to say, if this is the land that you want to be able to hold, then we're going to put some peacekeepers in there. We already hear the UK talk about putting peacekeepers in there, and we may talk about Ukraine joining NATO as a means by which we preclude you from having any further incursions. So I don't think Vladimir Putin is just going to get everything that he wants, and Zelensky is not going to get everything that he wants. And if he's going to continue to want U.S. aid, there has to be some benefit that the American taxpayer gets from that, and to include Donald Trump is talking about the minerals that he has there in Ukraine.
You know, if I may be so bold, I believe that the United States may have lied to both sides along the way from different administrations. We were told after the Warsaw Pact crumbled, we told Russia we would not march eastward with NATO. That's what we've done every single time since. On the other side of that, Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons, and we're told that, hey, if you give up your nuclear weapons, your border and your security and your sovereignty will be respected. Both of those things turned out to be false. NATO continued to march east. Ukraine has not had its borders respected or its sovereignty. Both sides have lost, and the United States was involved in all those conversations.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You talk about the security agreement treaty that was after the reduction of their nuclear weapons. But when I look at some of these Eastern European countries that decided they wanted to be part of NATO, I think that that was probably something that their countries could have been able to decide, and they did decide that. I don't like Turkey being in NATO. I think that that's someone we should look at expelling. But without a doubt, we don't want to see Russian aggression. I think that we have to deal strongly with the strong man, and that's Vladimir Putin. But we also have to let the Russian people know that we're not looking at any type of incursions against you. We're trying to protect this thing that we call Europe and make sure that we don't go down a very bad path like we did back in the late 1930s.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you, by the way, when it comes to Turkey. I think that is a suspect relationship, and I'm being polite because it's a family program, but it's a suspect relationship, to say the least. But I can appreciate where Russia comes from. Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, all on their border, all members of NATO, and I see the concern. So let me ask you this in closing. Do you think Donald Trump can get this done? If so, do you see a timetable here to bring peace back to that region?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump can get it done. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. It may really not take root until sometime later on in this year. But without a doubt, I believe that this is the opening salvo to getting this done, having those negotiators sit and talk. They'll go back to Vladimir Putin. They'll go back to Donald Trump, and we'll go on from there.
Exactly right. Colonel Alan West, always appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. God bless.
God bless, sir. We'll see you Monday. All right, after this break, the new DOJ task force president is calling for. That's right. Now that I've got your attention, what's President Trump calling for? Well, you'll have to stick around to find out here on America's Voice Live. Bit of breaking news at this moment, just hearing about a Delta Airlines flight from Minneapolis, St. Paul to Toronto, Ontario, Canada, apparently has slid on the snow and flipped over and crashed in some fashion at Toronto Pearson Airport. It's in Ontario, Canada. We know a little more. This is just breaking now. Again, a flight from Minneapolis to Toronto has been reported by CTV to have flipped over on the runway and crashed. Emergency crews obviously on the scene. We'll try to keep you up to speed on that as we know more. President Trump's announcement of a DOJ task force to combat anti-Christian bias. It is a historic move, to say the least. Christian conservatives have been targeted, pro-life advocates have been prosecuted, and Christian parents have been labeled extremists. Proponents of the president's plan say this isn't just a policy issue, it's a spiritual battle that our founders never would have tolerated. Join me now to discuss is religious liberty and freedom author, host, and pastor Todd Coconato. Pastor, nice to have you here today.
Steve, it's great to be with you. Thank you for having me, sir.
You know, I was surprised, and in a good way, Pastor, when I heard Donald Trump announce, because you don't always know what the executive orders are going to be. He has a stack of them there, and he's got the guy there with him. He says, here's what we're signing, and it's all very kind of ceremonial, right? And he says, this is to defend the Christian faith. I'm paraphrasing, of course, in America and all the Christian attacks, because it seems to me, and to a lot of Christians like myself, we're free game, especially white guys that are Christians like myself. We're free game twice. In this world of woke thinking and liberalism and this nonsense. How important to you when you heard that? When you heard he was signing an executive order to protect Christians and anti-Christian bias, what did you think?
Well, we've been on the front line in this battle, and a lot of people that don't see it every day like I do maybe don't understand how significant this is. But we've been under attack, to your point, Steve. I mean, parents that are going to school board meetings right here in Nashville and fighting against some of this woke, what I like to call demonic curriculum, have been labeled extremists because they don't want their kids being taught this gender nonsense. But this is what's been going on in the last 4 years, and even longer than that. I mean, we can go back to the Obama administration, and our founders were explicitly against this. In fact, they believed that our rights were given us by God, not by government, and that the government was meant to protect our religious liberty and freedom. And what we've seen is the stark opposite of that. Many people couldn't believe that this would ever happen in America, but this is where we've been. So we're thankful. I'm thankful, and our organization is thankful that President Trump understands this is a problem and that he's fighting back.
Yeah, he is fighting back. And look, we even saw the Democrats during their campaign and so forth, specifically going after Catholics as one example of targeting Christian groups. I mean, how outrageous is that?
Yeah, for the government to use its resources and agencies to target any form of religion in America is completely against our Constitution. And they've used activist judges. They've used a lot of these woke NGOs and organizations that have been funded. That a lot of it's coming out now with Doge, and we're seeing a lot of the funding of USAID and some of these organizations where some of the money's being funneled to. And I believe President Trump is going to put a stop to this. But this has been a war, and it is a spiritual battle. And for anybody that believes in God, we've been under attack, and we understand it. We feel it. And I'm believing that we've turned a corner now, but it's going to take the American people continuing to push back, to pray, to take a righteous stand, to get involved at the community level, at the school boards, local government, poll watchers. We need all hands on deck. The battle is not done yet, Steve. We're still in the initial stages, even though it is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, now we see, and I've seen this, I know you have as well, and I want you to weigh in on this, Pastor. And that is people that pray in England and France and Germany and in Europe being arrested and thrown in jail because they're praying on a public street, and yet their Muslim counterparts are free to do whatever they want when it comes to prayer. How can that be okay?
Well, and I think that's why President Trump has identified Christians and Catholics in particular. If you think about during the pandemic period, you didn't really hear other religions being attacked, but Christians were attacked. In California, they were told they can't even worship with music because, something might happen if they worship. Just ridiculous things. Governor Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, the New York governor, on and on of what I think was persecution. And I'm glad that a lot of this is now coming out. But if you remember, it was okay for people to go to Walmarts, to go to different places like that, but yet they deemed churches non-essential. So this has been going on for a while, but it's reached an apex moment. And, our counterparts across the pond over there, they're dealing with it, but they need to take a stand as well. In America, we have our Constitution and we have protection, but unfortunately, a lot of the government has really not heeded our Constitution. They've not looked at protecting our rights. Instead, they've gone the opposite direction. And that's why we need organizations like ours that stand against the infringement on religious liberty and freedom. But this battle needs to be continued to be waged. Parents, make sure you take a stand for your kids in your school, and make sure that make sure that they're not being told things that go against our faith and our beliefs. We've got to be vocal and be involved in our kids' lives, we have to.
And that's why I applaud J.D. Vance, by the way, for standing up in Europe and saying, look, the biggest threat is the fact that you don't have freedom of speech, that you do not have freedom of religion, that you do not, look, the First Amendment of the United States Constitution is the envy of the world, including those places that are allegedly free. Pastor, we'll have to save the rest until next time, but you come back anytime. I appreciate you being here.
Steve, appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It's so important. That's why J.D. Vance in his address to Europe was so important. Now, have you seen the news from economists forecasting a depression, not a recession, a depression by the year 2030? We are in a perfect storm as Social Security and Medicare hit a breaking point with the largest generation hitting retirement. Smaller workforce means a smaller tax base. Pair that with our growing national debt and rising cost of living, and we have a big problem. So what are you doing now to protect your family for the future? Gold is a safe haven in hard economic times, and Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold will help you transition existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, and it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Protect your future today. Text America to 989898. Get your free information kit on gold and a copy of the Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. There is no obligation, only information. Birch Gold has earned the trust of countless Americans looking to safeguard their savings. You can count on them, too. Look, you can do it. Text America to the number 989898. Do that today. You can trust these guys. I do. All right, coming up after the break, Vice President J.D. Vance, like I said, at a summit in Munich, an AI summit, and he went after just about everyone there. Details straight ahead. Speaking at an international conference last week, Vice President J.D. Vance pledged that the Trump administration would make U.S. dominance in artificial intelligence a top priority. His remarks included strong criticism of the European Union's extensive regulatory efforts, despite the event's focus on fostering global cooperation. Vance made it clear that the administration would resist any attempts by foreign governments to impose stricter controls on American tech companies. Joining me now is NetChoice Director of Policy, Patrick Hedger. Patrick, nice to see you again.
Hey, thank you.
It was pretty remarkable to see J.D. Vance stand up there and say, look, the biggest threat to you, to us, is not them. It's you and us trying to limit our own free speech. And you, Europe, are in a bad place. I mean, look, we're getting people thrown in jail because AI algorithms say, oh, here's a phrase we don't like. Here's a phrase. I'll turn that into the police. Turn that. I mean, I was watching, and I think everybody saw this, the 60 Minutes raids in Germany that was on the show yesterday. All these people getting arrested for social media posts. Really? This is where we live now, Patrick? Really?
Yeah, this is why it is so crucial to have a government in place that defends American technology, but also defends the First Amendment. And we can't work to erode First Amendment protections for anybody, even if we end up disagreeing with them, because those powers will be abused someday, like we are seeing overseas where they do not have First Amendment protections. Certainly, can't defend a lot of the content that people are getting arrested for, because arresting people for speech is so fundamentally un-American, and it's incredible to see this administration standing up against the Europeans for their violations of civil liberties, as well as the European propensity to be overly regulatory. And the Europeans have rushed to put in place AI regulations without any sort of AI industry to speak of. So the Europeans are very far afield, and it's right for this administration, particularly the vice president, to call them out on it.
Right, absolutely, as he should, and he should call them out on it, right? I mean, look, if you repost something in Europe, you're not even the original poster. You just say like something or repost it, bam, you go to jail. I mean, this is so far beyond the pale. This is supposed to be the enlightened Europe, the place where the robust exchange of ideas, originated. And the only place that's protected now is the United States, and probably only because Donald Trump got elected. Otherwise, these hate speech laws, they'd be arresting us in America if we didn't get the election won in the proper way. Wouldn't you agree?
I look at the track record of the Biden administration on speech and on technology policy, and those things tend to go hand in hand because so much speech is online these days. And the Biden administration was atrocious on these fronts. What we saw was the jawboning of American tech companies, putting pressure on American tech companies to take content down, and the administration pressuring these companies through threats of things like antitrust enforcement if they didn't get their way. I'm really encouraged to see that the Trump administration put in place an executive order to end that on day one, the jawboning and the inappropriate pressuring of American tech companies against their own users. But we've got to have that codified, right? An executive order can be undone day one. So Senator Rand Paul has a bill out there that would essentially codify what the Trump administration did to prevent this from happening. I'd love to see that get passed into law because, we have Europe staring at us and showing what the alternative is, and it's unacceptable and it doesn't work fundamentally with American values.
Yeah, and so you look at the fact that I am a free speech absolutist. I am. And if not for certain FCC policy, I would say more colorful things here. But I understand there's rules in some places, but there's not a restriction on how I present myself or what I say. Hate speech was just a place where you could throw people, into the clink because you didn't like their ideas. Not what they said, you just didn't like their ideas, so you try to categorize it. And when you try to define speech, that is a dangerous place to be. I hope that Donald Trump and his pursuit of free speech continues to have traction in this country, Patrick, because without free speech, without the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and all 5 things that it addresses, we are no longer America, and this is not a good thing. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And that's why we're so skeptical at NetChoice of some policies that we've seen being pushed to force people to give away their ID or put in their ID to use online services, as well as policies that would empower governments like or government bureaus like the FTC to decide what is and what is not appropriate speech online. There's a great impetus out there to do more to protect people online, but sacrificing online anonymity and then also giving the power to the government to police what is and what is not acceptable speech, even for the best intentions, is fundamentally un-American.
I'm going to change my mind. I have one more thing I want to ask you about real quick. Section 230, when it comes to things like Backpage, I think that's what it was called, right? That had all the human trafficking and of underage people. I mean, there have to be some common sense applied. I don't want censorship, but you can't be trafficking in young girls either. I'll give you one quick comment on that, and then I'm out of here.
Yeah, so Section 230 only applies to civil cases. So civil cases, it prevents frivolous lawsuits from being filed against companies. Somebody filing a lawsuit against a company because they didn't like what you had to say. Section 230 does not impact criminal law. So if you're committing crime online, Section 230 does nothing to protect you.
Yeah, but those lawsuits have been tried half a dozen times now and all failed in human trafficking. That's a conversation for another day. Patrick, come back for that one because it'll be a spicy one, I am quite sure. Sir, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
There you have it. 230. That is the dark side of Section 230 for sure. Now, don't go anywhere. America's Live will continue after a quick break. Continuing coverage of the breaking news out of Toronto, a Delta flight en route from Minneapolis to Toronto landed successfully, but then flipped over on the runway. You can see the video there. Apparently 8 injuries reported so far. We don't have any reports of fatalities thus far, but as you can see, the icy conditions on the runway may have been a factor there. One of those injuries critical. We'll have more on that as the information becomes available. Meanwhile, Rav's own Ben Berquam riding along with El Paso Border Patrol last week when Ben saw the brave men and women of Border Patrol take down illegals. Watch this that Ben put together.
The cartel's getting really frustrated.
Smuggling, human trafficking.
They want to make their money. And they're getting stopped right now. He's cutting across. They're going to keep coming. Start throwing rocks.
We'll keep fighting for you. We won't give up.
Yeah. We also have some more footage of Ben running with Border Patrol and getting rocks thrown at him by an illegal. Watch this clip.
This guy.
They're throwing rocks. We got him throwing rocks.
Other guy got it.
Never a dull moment. This guy knows how to have fun, doesn't he? Joining me now, Ben Bergquam, of course, the man in the video, the man running and getting stones thrown at him. He'll do whatever it takes to get the story for you. Ben, nice to see you. Good Lord. Never a dull moment, but that's something new, isn't it?
Well, it's not the first time I've had rocks thrown at me. And by the way, that first video, shout out to Clayton, one of our editors, incredible. The behind-the-scenes guy do some incredible work. I do the initial footage, and then they put it together and make it all pretty. But this was I was out there with El Paso. This is a slow time. That's the shocking thing about this. We have some of the lowest numbers we've had in years now, from 11,000 encounters a day down to a couple hundred encounters a day. But even with that, the cartel there, they still operate at will. There's nothing stopping them on the Mexico side. So basically what you have, and if you saw me chasing that guy, and as soon as he crossed over the road, I slowed down, because as soon as he stepped on the other side of that road, that was Mexico. And so there's nothing you can do at that point. He's free to stay there. And they just sit there and wait, and then they'll take their opportunity to run back. It's like Red Rover, to try to come into the country, and Border Patrol's out there just chasing these guys down, tracking them down, tackling them when they can. It's just, it's the Wild West, and God bless our Border Patrol for doing it. But the cartels operate at will.
Kidding.
That's what the American people need to understand.
Yeah, and that's right. Now, I've been monitoring some of these military flights from the United States operating in the Gulf of California and coming down over Mexico proper. They're obviously, my guess is they're obviously, charting and graphing where the cartels are operating most predominantly. And I think that the cartels are in for a big surprise, because I'll give them two words: predator drone. If you take a shot, because there's been reporting that they're willing to shoot at American agents, I rue the day that they make that kind of a mistake, Ben, because I don't think Tom Homan or Donald Trump or Kristi Noem or any of us will take that sitting down.
No, and this is the rules of engagement. These guys are out there. President Trump labels these guys terrorist organizations. The rules of engagement change, and they can be killed on the spot if they show violence towards us, towards America, towards our border, towards our sovereignty. They can be taken out, and that's really what has to start happening. These guys are terrorist organizations. They dismember bodies while they're still alive. They are the most evil people you can imagine, and they're out there just taunting us. At one point, one guy pulled his pants down, one of the coyotes over there, because he knows nobody's going to do anything to him. But you're right. When those rules of engagement go into effect, and our military treats these guys like the terrorists that they are, they're not going to be smiling. They're going to be hiding in bunkers. They're going to be running away, because it's going to change in a hurry for them.
Yeah, I think you're right. And one more quick note: you talk about how the numbers have plummeted to a few hundred from 10 or 11,000. I just saw a story today about a Jewish charity closed an incoming reception center in San Diego because they haven't gotten a single illegal since Donald Trump took the oath of office. Not one. I mean, it's working, isn't it? Real quickly.
Yeah, that's Jewish Family Services. They're one of the 9 primary organizations, the NGOs, that have been raping our country and inviting the invasion into our country. And now they're sad that the gravy train is over. But President Trump just showed all you have to do is America first. You can secure the border. Joe Biden showed America last invites the invasion.
Yeah, Ben Bergquam. Never miss an episode of Law and Border with Ben Bergquam. You'll see more of what you just saw there. You'll see the truth. And Ben, we thank you for all that you do every day, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There you have it. The Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, is the largest collection agency in the world. And with April 15 coming faster than you can imagine, it's more aggressive than ever. In 2025, enforcement has ramped up. And if you have back taxes that you owe or have unfiled returns, well, waiting's really not an option. The longer you do, the worse it gets. Ignoring your tax troubles is the worst thing you can possibly do. April 15th marks another tax year that has passed you by. Getting ahead of this right now is a smart move, but never contact the IRS alone. Let the experts at Tax Network USA handle it for you. Why? Because not all tax resolution companies are the same. Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line to the IRS, meaning they know who to deal with and who to avoid. With proven strategies to settle your tax problems in your favor, whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, Tax Network USA's attorneys and negotiators have resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. That's with a B. Talk with one of their strategists today. It's free. Stop the threatening letters. Stop looking over your shoulder and protect yourself from property seizures and bank levies. Don't let the IRS control your future. Call 800-905-8000 or visit tnusa.com/RAV. April 15th, just around the corner. Act now before the IRS acts first. All right, up after the break, we'll tell you how America is still wonderful and the answers to the America's Voice question of the day. What actions or decisions from past presidents do you think have had the most lasting impact on America today? This is President's Day, and I'll be right back. Well, what makes America wonderful? We do it every day to make sure you have a smile on your face like this one. That's right, reminding you of how wonderful America is every day. How about this one? Denver firefighters teaming up with local organizations and Denver public schools. They're ensuring that every child stays warm this winter. And how important is it? It's been a cold winter. Through their collective efforts, they provided 1,000 brand new winter coats to students at Marama Elementary and Monroe Elementary, spreading warmth and happiness to young students in need. Last year, the program was only able to support one school, but thanks to increased fundraising and community support, this year they doubled their impact, providing 600 coats to the first elementary school, 400 to the next. So, man, they're getting it out there. The excitement didn't stop with just the coats. After picking out their cozy new jackets, the kids were treated to an up-close look at the firefighters' trucks. With wide eyes and big smiles, they explored the fire engines and met the heroes who keep their community safe every single day. What makes America wonderful? Heroes. We need those, our heroes in America, that no matter what, strive to help people in need and show how truly wonderful our country, our beautiful country, truly is. All right, how about your question of the day, America? Here it is. What actions or decisions from past presidents do you think have had the most lasting impact on America today? Tim Paul. George Washington, walking away after 2 terms. That's right. He could have been there forever. He could have made himself king, Tim, but he said, that's not us. Richard Ayala, the creation of the Federal Reserve and federal income tax under Woodrow Wilson, a progressive. Lasting impact, I think Richard's saying, not a good one. Lynn Scher, open borders of Biden. Well, Lynn, in modern times, that might be true. You might be right. Leaping Lena says this: Nixon taking us off the gold standard via executive order. Carter on the Panama Canal. LBJ with all of his anti-American policies. Bush gutting American production. Need I go on? Well, yeah. I mean, there might be some positive things to be found.